Are other people saying to him in his own party, you know, save this for something about sewage repair in Jacksonville, stay out of something like this, that's important, you're only humiliating yourself?
Well, you would hope so, but, you know, these senators, if he does get elected, you know, senators do have a voice in foreign policy. It's an important voice, and, you know, it's rare that anyone really suggests that what the Middle East needs are more guns, more bombs, or even more oil. You know, there was this thing in Iraq where both sides had guns and it turned into a civil war. It didn't really work out so well. So I don't see how anyone who is of sound mind could think it was a good idea for Iran to go down the same path.
And yet the overall message from, say, the soundbite we heard of Lindsey Graham the other minute here was Obama is weak because he has not done something. Have we, as of yet, gotten that something defined? Is he supposed to ball up his fists and threaten somebody? Is he supposed to send shock and awe? As I asked last week, does he have bombs available to him that only would kill Ahmadinejad's supporters?
Well, here's the difficult thing. If you're going to talk tough, you really do have to back it up with something. Otherwise, actually, you look weaker. And this isn't, you know, people have raised the parallels with Tiananmen Square. This isn't really the same idea because there are no real diplomatic relations with Iran to break off. There are obviously extensive sanctions out there. So getting tough, it really is hard to define. And, of course, as we've discussed many times, tough talk can be incredibly counterproductive. I think what you're seeing here is a number of Republicans who fought and failed to win the argument in the general election of last year about weakness, about naivete, as John McCain used to describe it, and just want to continue that debate.
As supported, I suppose, by the Iranians who are on the streets and saying basically the feedback has been to the U.S. as the Iranians are threatening to kick out Western diplomats and make that sort of the semi-focus of this. The feedback has largely been, hey, thanks for standing somewhat back so you do not dilute the message. I mean, that's the ultimate issue here, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's incredibly hard. No one who has seen those pictures could fail to be moved by the humanitarian piece of this and the human suffering. But the question is, does it work to get involved here to become the demonizing influence? Already the regime is trying to do so, and they're calling these protesters basically foreign manipulated terrorists. They're already in enough danger as it is. The last thing we should do is put them in even more danger.
Richard Wolff of MSNBC, author of Renegade. As always, Richard, thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
As we just recounted, the geopolitical geniuses who brought you the Iraq War want President Obama to now vow unending support for the protesters in Iran, to keep rallying them until they win and possibly even join them in their fight. Our fourth story tonight, the obvious argument, why not? What could possibly go wrong? It's not as if history offers any cautionary examples against U.S. intervention in that neighborhood, or specifically in that country, or does it? In 1953, after Prime Minister Mossadegh talked about taking Iran's oil away from the foreign companies profiting off of it, the CIA got rid of him. And the CIA helped install the unelected former Shah of Iran to return from exile. When he fled the country again during the revolution of 1979, the U.S. helped him to escape trial, granting asylum to this known human rights abuser. That, in turn, sparked fears the U.S. would again intervene and again reinstall him, and that helped fuel support for the Ayatollah's forces, who soon succeeded. Among their demands, no more U.S. intervention. Soon after, Saddam Hussein intervened instead with his army. Hundreds of thousands of Iranians died, thanks in part to Iraq's assistance from U.S. officials, arming Iraq against Iran, intervening again, as they would soon do in Afghanistan, helping to arm and support the anti-Soviet Mujahideen fighters there, like this fellow Osama bin Laden. So why not intervene for Mousavi? What could go wrong with installing another power player in the Mideast, one who pledges allegiance to the same Ayatollah Khomeini who led the anti-American revolution in 1979? Back on this planet, in fairness, we should ask whether non-intervention, Teddy Roosevelt's speak softly approach, has ever worked either. Let's take as a random example Teddy Roosevelt. 100 years ago, he and his successor, William Howard Taft, were pressured by evangelical Christian politicians to jump into another revolution overseas, known as the Mashrute. As thousands died, Roosevelt and Taft kept quiet. When it was all over, America's silence was taken as signs of support that America would not exploit the country for its own interests. And for the next 30 years, America had enjoyed a positive, healthy relationship with this country, which we now know as Iran. Joining me now, Iranian-American author and historian John Ghazvinian of the University of Pennsylvania, whose posting today on HuffingtonPost.com informed our history recap just now, and who made history himself by voting in Iran before leaving the country last Tuesday. Great, thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Good evening, Keith.
Let's say Obama comes out tomorrow at that midday news conference and says the conservatives are right. We need strong rhetoric. We need to fire up these protesters without, anything military. In what scenarios could that backfire and wind up hurting both the protesters and, let's be selfish about it, America's interest in Iran?
Well, Keith, I think your intro actually says it all. Let's try to remember where and how the Iranian Revolution started in the first place. The first time anybody really heard of Ayatollah Khomeini was actually in 1963 when he led a very emotionally charged protest against U.S. interference in Iran. 15 years later, he had galvanized an entire country behind a revolution. And before that, in 1953, as you say, the CIA overthrew a very, very popular democratically elected prime minister. We literally hired and paid goons and thugs and mobs to run riot in the streets of Tehran so that they would create instability and chaos so the army could move in and have an excuse to remove the prime minister. The key point about the Iranian democracy movement, Keith, is that it didn't start with Twitter. It's been going on for well over 100 years, 120 years arguably, and throughout that entire time it's been unique in the sense that the movement for democracy in Iran has gone hand in hand with a passionate desire not to see foreign interference in Iran. And I have to say, I think, thankfully, we seem to have a president here in the United States who has at least some awareness of that history.
So every time, one of the arguments was made during the Bush administration that every time he called Iran part of the axis of evil, essentially he verified, within Iran, he verified Ahmadinejad's paranoia about the United States and the West in general. Are the Republicans doing that now, even just their own, there should be more fight in Obama's words? Is that by itself confirming whatever paranoia there is about the United States and possible intervention right now?
I think they're staying just short of the line, but they're getting very close to it if they keep this up, particularly if they push the president into making statements that he wouldn't otherwise make. Look, these guys in Tehran, particularly the Ahmadinejad and the Khamenei camp, are waiting for an opportunity to pounce on any kind of evidence, the slightest evidence. We've seen this in the last couple of days, the way they've attacked the British. Any kind of evidence that might suggest there might be any kind of foreign hand in this. The really interesting thing is that these protests, by and large, have taken the regime off guard. They seem to have spent the last 10 days seeming somewhat confused, a little bit directionless, not quite sure how to respond. There's nothing they would want more right now than some sort of galvanizing piece of heavy-handed American rhetoric that they could hold on to. That would be the greatest gift that we could give them, and there's no question about it.
But of course, the full extent of the Republican advice here isn't just support. It is win. Let's play the whole thing out. Let's suppose Obama helped Mousavi rhetorically, maybe militarily, in some sort of secret fashion, and Mousavi takes power with American backing. How could that go wrong?
Well, let's assume, I mean, this is all assuming
yes.
that, A, we actually know where Mousavi is, which nobody seems to, and certainly since we haven't had any kind of presence in Iran for 30 years, there's no reason why we would have any real intelligence on this. Let's assume further that Mousavi actually wants our help, or that he would accept our help, which, frankly, he never would. I mean, I think that would be the kiss of death for him. But, all those dubious assumptions aside, if we want to play out some sort of fantasy scenario in which somehow, even rhetorically, we help encourage him into power. Let's just imagine what would happen, if somehow Mousavi ends up becoming president at the end of this. If there's even the slightest appearance that he owes his position to the United States, he's going to spend the next 4 years of his presidency batting away constant allegations that he's some sort of American puppet. That's not a great start. Imagine if during the Cold War, at the height of the Cold War, Walter Mondale in 1984 had won his election, and then a couple months later it turned out the Russians had helped him. That's the kind of scenario that you'd be dealing with. It's the kiss of death for a politician in Iran to look like he's got any kind of even rhetorical support from the United States.
John Ghazvinian, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, voter in this landmark Iranian election. Great, thanks for your perspective. It has opened a lot of eyes, I think. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.